Hi everybody, welcome back for another Hoop Studio video. Today we're going to work on the Hoop Studio Sweet Scallop Baskets. Hoop Studio is a monthly subscription product by Me Time Delivered, which is a Kimberbell company. I'll have that linked below. If you decide after watching this video to sign up for Hoop Studio, please consider using my link. As a Kimberbell affiliate, I receive a small commission, but more importantly, it lets Kimberbell know people are watching my videos. I've already done all of my fabric cutting and prep. This month in your instructions, and this is the April project, April 2026, you want to look in your downloads for your fabric cutting diagram. They give you enough fabric in this kit to make both the small and the large basket, but you have to be careful how you cut your fabric. So make sure you have a look at that before you cut your fabric. Anything that needs fusible, I've already put the fusible on the back. The shape form that's included isn't cut to exact size, but it's cut close enough, so I actually didn't trim it. I just set the two smaller pieces aside for the small, the two larger pieces for the large. I did cut my ribbon. Check your instructions. Don't use the whole length that's in the kit. It's too much. And I've pulled my threads. Let's look at the threads. We only need 4 threads for this project. I've got them all in my Creativity Blooms leather snap tray. I have a video on my channel showing how to embroider on the Kimberbell leather snap tray. In the description box, there's also a link for this free Creativity Blooms pattern. For the small basket, all we need is the color linen. I don't have linen. I have this color pearl, which is actually a glide thread. This is going to work just fine. I went ahead and picked that. For the larger basket, they gave a mix of Hemingworth and glide threads. I just pulled some threads from my thread wall. These are all sim threads. They came from Amazon. I bought a box of all the colors when I first started doing machine embroidery. They work really well. We needed colors for icicle blue, celery, and papaya. I didn't match these to the glide color card like I normally do. I just went ahead and pulled threads that look good with the fabric. So these are the numbers in case you have sim thread. This is for the ice blue, celery, and papaya. We're going to start today with the small basket, which can be made in a 5x7 hoop. It tells us in the instructions that we need the light mesh cutaway stabilizer. I have already put my stabilizer in my hoop, ready to go. Let's head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I like to have my instructions next to me on this folding metal book stand. Go ahead and bring up our file. We've got our sweet scalloped baskets. We're doing the small basket, so the 5x7 file, there's only one file that we need. Go ahead and bring that up and hit set. Embroidery, we're ready to go. I have the color pearl on my machine. If you have glide linen or a beige, whatever you have, pick your thread color. We're going to leave it on for the entire project. We're going to start out by stitching the base placement line, and you're going to stitch that directly onto your stabilizer. Once that's stitched out, you want to place one piece of the shape form covering that placement line, and you're going to want to tape it in place. It sits really nice inside the 5x7 hoop. I'm actually going to go ahead and take this off my machine and set it on a table and add a good sized piece of tape across the top and the bottom. I've got my tape along the top and the bottom. We're going to stitch the tack down line. You want to remove your tape and trim away everything outside the tack down line. I usually use 2 kinds of scissors for my Kimberbell projects. I have the double curve applique and the snips. To trim this, I'm going to use the double curve applique. The snips are really good for getting into small places when you're only trimming fabric. This is a little bit thicker. I'll go ahead and use these and get that trimmed. I've got that trimmed. If you accidentally cut the stitch line, don't worry about it. We're going to be putting fabric on top of this. It'll get tacked down. If you accidentally cut your stabilizer, put a piece of paper tape underneath it, press it down really good, and you can keep going. We're going to stitch out the bottom placement line. Grab one piece of the bottom fabric, cover that placement line. I've got a piece of tape right there at the top. Double check, looks good. It's a light colored fabric. Check underneath, make sure there's no dog hairs, lint, fuzz, anything like that you can see through your fabric. Once you've got that taped in place, we're going to stitch the tack down. Once it's tacked down, we're going to stitch the bottom quilting detail. You're not going to trim the fabric at this time. Just leave it just like this and then stitch out that bottom quilting detail. The quilting is stitched out. The next thing we're going to stitch is the top ribbon placement line. It's just going to stitch a line right along the top. we're going to go ahead and trim away this piece of fabric right here. I've got that fabric trimmed. You want to grab your ribbon, and it says to place it right side up. It does have a right and a wrong side. The right side is the shiny side. The wrong side is the dull side. Unless you like the dull side, then place the dull side up. I'm going to place it right side up, shiny side up, on top of the fabric, centered on that stitch line we just stitched out. So it's going to go right there. Don't put it here on top of the shape form. We're centering it on top of the fabric, and we want to tape that into place. Got a couple pieces of tape. Make sure that's centered along that line. I'm going to double check. Looks good. That's taped into place. The next thing we want to do is grab a piece of our top fabric. That's the red fabric. This one. We're going to place it right side down on top of the ribbon, centered along the stitch line, and tape into place. So right side down, centered along the ribbon, and we're going to tape that. Go ahead and add the tape. Everything is nice and secure. We're ready to put this back on our machine. We're going to stitch the seam. I'm going to run right along here. The seam has stitched out. It does tell us to take this over to the iron, flip it right side up, use a pressing cloth, and flip well. If you do that, make sure you remove any tape you have. Don't run your iron over the tape because it'll get sticky and goopy and turn brown. I'm going to use a seam roller. I went ahead and took off my tape. I'm just going to fold it like this, give it a press with my hands, and then use the seam roller. This is a Lori Holt wooden seam roller. I also have a plastic clover seam roller. This one's a little more hefty. I'm going to use that for this. I think they make this one in pink now. I've had this one for quite some time. Make sure that's nice and pressed. When I use seam rollers, a lot of the time, I'll just give it a little bit of an extra press and then grab some tape just to make sure that it stays in place. This is ready to put back on the machine. Next, we're going to stitch out the top tack down line. It's going to stitch along the scallops at the top of this fabric. Grab a piece of your lining fabric. We want to cover the project, and you need to place this right side down. So make sure it's right side down. Covers the whole project easily. It does say tape into place. You can add a little piece of tape just to hold it, put it back on the machine, and then we're going to stitch the seam. It looks like that's going to stitch right along the top again. Once that's stitched out, it says to remove all the tape. So check your project. If you have any more tape on there, make sure you get all the tape off. I've removed all the tape. We're going to stitch the trimming line. It's going to go all the way around the project. That's it for this piece, but we need 2 of these. Before we step through all of the trimming, I'm going to make the second piece. I think that's easier, so you can take this out of your hoop, set it aside, make the second piece. I'll do that off camera. I've got my 2 pieces here for the small basket. When I go forward into the instructions and I look at the large basket, it says sew the basket together and refer to the small basket instructions. So what I'm going to do is take the small basket pieces. Remember, you have to have 2. I'm going to go ahead and set them aside, and we're going to stitch out the large basket. Then we'll assemble everything together. There's a couple of things that are different about the large basket. First is it's the large basket. You stitch it in an 8 by 12 hoop. It has the center section with the embroidery. So there's a front, and then there's also going to be a back. So we're going to work our way through the front, and then there's separate instructions that are different for the back. Let's go ahead and stitch out the large basket, and then we'll assemble both together. This basket has 2 parts, the front and the back. We'll start with the front, which is the part that has the flowers on it like that. You want the color icicle blue on your machine. For icicle blue, I'm using this color. This is a sim thread. Anything that starts with an S is a sim thread. I'm going to load this on my machine, and the first thing we're going to stitch out is the base placement line. We're going to do the same steps we did for the small basket. I'll go ahead and run them together. We're going to stitch out the base placement line, place your larger piece of shape form, add your tape, stitch the base tack down, remove the tape, and then trim it close to the stitch line. I'll go ahead and run all that together. Once you've got your shape form trimmed, we're going to stitch out the basket placement line. We're Grab your basket fabric. We're going to cover the placement line, and then we're going to stitch the basket tack down. You won't trim it. You'll go right into stitching the quilting. There are two separate steps on your machine. I'll go ahead and run them together. Check underneath. Make sure there's no dark fuzzies or dog hair, cat hair, anything that's going to show through. Stitch the tack down, then stitch the quilting. Once the quilting has stitched out, we're going to stitch the accent placement line. Grab your accent fabric. We need to cover the placement line right there. It's a long, thin rectangle, a little difficult to see because it's stitched in the icicle blue, which blends in with the fabric. We'll add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch the accent and tack down line. We're still in the icicle blue color. Once that's tacked down, you're going to want to go ahead and remove the tape and trim everything that's outside of the stitch line. I've got that all trimmed. Back on the machine it goes. We're still in the icicle blue. Let's stitch the satin outline. I'm going to switch to the color linen. I'm using pearl in place of linen, and we're going to stitch out the Lebo placement line. We've got embroidery leather in the kit to use for the label. I didn't trim mine, I just took the whole piece. Embroidery leather is a PVC product. It's not real leather. It is not an animal product. We want to cover that placement line. Go ahead and tape, stitch out the tack down, and then trim. I've got that trimmed. If you use the whole piece like I did and place it really close to the edge of that stitch line, you can actually get two, just big enough to get two labels. So if you lay that down carefully, you can get two labels out of that. Once you've got that trimmed, we're going to stitch the Lebo satin outline. You're going to need wash away topping for the next step. This is the piece that came in the kit, plenty big enough. In fact, I think if I cut it in half, let's see. Yep, you can cut it in half and you'll have enough to make that second label from your piece of scrap leather. So go ahead and cut a piece of that. If you've never worked with wash away topping before, what it does is it keeps your threads from sinking down into the embroidery leather. We want to make sure you've got that label covered. Grab some tape. I would tape it top and bottom. Don't worry about making sure it's completely smooth. It's going to tear away or wash away. So if there's some wrinkles in here, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you've got that covered. Switch to the color celery, and we're going to stitch out the leaves. Switch to the color papaya. We're going to stitch out the flowers. Switch to linen, or in my case pearl, and we're going to stitch out the flower centers fill. Once that's stitched out, you can remove the tape and then tear away the wash away topping. If anything remains, it's wash away. I'm going to go ahead and pull it. Looks like I've got a little bit left here and here. I can take care of that later. Usually I get a sponge brush or a damp Kleenex for something this small and just kind of let it sit for a second. It'll melt and dissolve, and then you can pull it off. If once you have all the topping off, it still feels sticky, that means there's a little bit left. If this was fabric, I would just use tweezers and kind of scrape until I can get it pulled up, but because it's the embroidery leather, I don't want to scratch the leather. So to get this piece up in the center, I probably will have to get the project wet. What we're going to do now is cover it with our lining fabric. And then once this piece is stitched out, we're going to go right into stitching the other piece. I'm going to do all the trimming and everything at the same time, so it's going to be covered for a little while. Go ahead and put your lining fabric right side down, and we're going to stitch the seam that's going to run along the scallop at the top. Next, we're going to stitch the trimming line. It's going to go all the way around the project. We're done with this for now. I'm going to get this out of the hoop, load some stabilizer, and we're going to stitch out the other part of this project, and then we'll trim and assemble both the small and the large basket. Let's go ahead and load part B. Part B is pretty much part A, but just without that center detailing. So a lot of these steps are similar. I'm going to run some things together so we can get right to assembling our basket. We're going to start with the color Ice Blue. We'll stitch out the base placement line, place our shape form, tape it in place, stitch the tack down, and trim the shape form. All trimmed, we're going to stitch out the basket fabric placement line. Grab your basket fabric, place it right side up over that stitch line. Make sure there's nothing underneath again. And then we're going to stitch the tack down and then go right into the quilting, just like last time. All the quilting is done. We're going to stitch the accent placement line. Grab your accent fabric, find that placement line again, the long skinny rectangle. Make sure you've got it completely covered. Tape both ends, stitch the tack down and trim. That's all trimmed, and since this part of the basket doesn't have that center detail, the satin outline is going to go completely up and down both sides. If you haven't checked your bobbin, you may want to check it before you start. Go ahead and stitch out the satin outline. Satin outline is stitched. We want to grab our lining fabric right side down, cover the entire piece. Mine actually has a little bit of selvage there, so I want to make sure that that is outside the stitch line. It is. So we're going to set that down, add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch the seam just like before, the scallop, and then we'll stitch the trimming line all the way around. We are all done. I'm going to take this over to the table and we're going to put both of our baskets together. I've got my small basket and my large basket, 2 pieces each. Let's start with the small basket. You can see all I've done so far is trim away the extra stabilizer. Looking at the instructions, it talks to us about removing the project from the hoop and trimming directly on the trimming line. Your trimming line is this line here, and then on your scallop it's this outside line, so not the inside line, but the outside line. So the first thing is to just trim all the way around on the trimming line. So you have 2 pieces for the small, 2 pieces for the large. I think what I'm going to do is anywhere where there's a straight line, I'm going to go ahead and use a ruler and a rotary cutter and cut those parts, because that'll be easier for me if I've got the ruler and the rotary cutter. And then, after I've got all the straight parts cut, you have a line here and here as well. Once all those straight parts are cut, I'll take some scissors and trim the scallop. I've got that all trimmed. At the edge, there's a little bit of a straight line on both sides, and then you do the scallop. I need to do this for all 4 pieces. I've got these all trimmed. The next step, it shows us clipping the curves of the scallops and clipping into each of the valley of the scallops. I mean, clip here and don't cut the stitching because we're going to be flipping this. So the first thing I'm going to do is clip these. And then I think I'm going to see if I can get these with my pinking shears. My pinking shears are really big. Let's see if I can manage to do these rather than trimming all those little curves. It's just to help reduce the bulk when we flip this. This is going to work just fine. I could have probably trimmed the stitch line with these, but they are a little big. If you've got small pinking shears, I think that'll work great. So now I need to go back on all the pieces, and I'll make sure that I trim in between in the curves like that. Don't cut your stitches, and then go back over with my pinking shears if you don't have pinking shears. And the instructions, they show snipping like little bits, little bits, little bits. It's just going to help when we flip this. When you're trimming the large basket, it shows trimming on this side, the red side, not this side. Just be careful. I just finished the 2 small ones and I'm using those big honkin' pinking shears. I had to be really careful not to catch the stitching. And I've got my little pieces in between cut out. So I'm going to do the same thing for the large, going around the edges, getting rid of some of that bulk. And then once I go across all the tops, I can go back and just snip right there to get as close to the stitch line as I can, but don't cut the stitches. I've got all 4 pieces done, the small and the large. It says to separate the lining from the outer fabric shape form, turn the project right side out, carefully poke the scallops with a blunt tip to smooth. So you've got your lining and your shape form. Getting these poked through and then getting a little pokey thing to help. I have my clover point turner handy. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's turn them all with the fingers like that. Just as a side note, if you don't feel like you need the scallops, if you stitched this out and then went to your sewing machine and put a straight stitch there, flip it like that, and you'll have a straight edge basket. That works too. Here's how that looks before I use the tool. This is a clover point turner. There's all different kinds of turners. This is pretty blunt edged. I'd be careful since there's no lining on that. You don't want to poke that. Told you to work the scallops. Do the best you can. I've got all these turned. Let's go over a few observations. This did okay. I ended up pulling this tool, which is also a clover tool. This is to use while ironing so you don't burn your fingers, but it's got this nice curved edge. If you have what's called a purple thang, T-H-A-N-G, I have one of those too. That's probably going to work. The curved edge was very helpful. I did better with the large than the small. These just seem to turn much easier. It may be because I started by trimming the small and then I trimmed the large. Maybe I got better at it. I sat down in a chair. I put it like this on my leg. So I had it pressed down on my leg, and then I just took my tool and I kind of pulled the top fabric and ran my tool underneath, sort of like this. So you're going up and into the scallop. And that seemed to smooth it down really well. It does tell us to use a pressing cloth, press well, and then we're going to work on assembly. If you're pressing from the front, definitely use a pressing cloth. You don't want to ruin your embroidery leather. You don't want to ruin the ribbon. I'm actually going to start by pressing from the back. What I'm going to do is get it down on my ironing board and kind of pull and get that as tight as I can get, and then get that nice and pressed. See how nice that looks? That looks really good. I want it pressed in that position. So I don't know if I have to necessarily press from the front. A little bit of your lining is going to show. It's even like that in the picture. See how you see a little bit of the red here and a little bit of the blue here. So you will see a little bit of your lining peeking over the top. So to be on the safe side, I'm going to press these all from the back, give them kind of a little pull like that, hold it, give it a good press, and then I'll probably put my clapper on top. If you don't know what a clapper is, it's a piece of wood. Sometimes they're called tailor's clappers. I've got a couple. This one happens to say quilt on it. So you iron and then you put it like that and you leave it for a while. It absorbs the heat and helps you get a nice flat seam. I'm going to do that for all 4 pieces. These are all pressed. I'm going to put a picture on the screen. The picture shows you how I use the clappers. I did not use steam when I pressed these. I used a hot iron, lining side up. I did apply quite a bit of pressure with my iron, made sure to get everything nice and flat. I would lay it down on the ironing board like this facing me, and I took the lining, pulled it toward me, kind of lined up the edges, and then put my iron down. You can see how nice and flat that came out. Even the blue, it's got a little bit of a wrinkle in some places, but it came out really nice and flat. I was worried about that little bit of a wrinkle there, but that's okay. That's the inside. Let's go ahead and get these assembled. They're both going to be assembled the same way. Might as well do them both at the same time. The first thing it tells us is to open the basket front and basket back and place them right sides together, matching the linings together on the outer sides as shown. So lining sides together like that. And then this side together. We need to match, I would say, look at the side too and make sure you're matching up your scallops. Let's do the small one first. We've got our 2 pieces. You don't have to pull this out. It's going to stay nice and flat. Right sides together. We're only going to sew here, so top, bottom, and then this piece over here. I'm going to go ahead and turn this to face me. It's going to make it easier for me. You can use pins or clips. I went ahead and grabbed clips. This is a little bit bulky. I'm going to clip where I'm going to sew. So I need to sew here, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I need to sew along the side. And then for this part, I can use pins if I want because it's just fabric, but I've got the clips, so I'll just go ahead and clip. We're going to sew on that side, make sure it's matched up, and then we're going to sew on this side. Let's add some clips. I'm checking to make sure I'm matching my sides to the best I can. I'm going to take the larger basket and do the same thing. We've got that clipped. There's one more place where we're sewing. I had to look really close at picture number 2. We're going to leave most of this open. It shows sewing a little tiny bit here and a little tiny bit here. We are going to be flipping this, but they only want us to sew just a little bit. We're going to need to leave an opening, and it doesn't really give a measurement as far as how much to sew. So I'll just sew just a little bit, and I'll go ahead and sew this at the sewing machine, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'll bring it back and I'll show you where all the stitching went. All done at the sewing machine. Here's where we stitched. Back and forth right there, back and forth right there. We're going to be flipping this right side out, so I went back and forth because we're going to be opening this. I don't want it to pop out when I'm trying to flip it. And I actually went back and forth on all the ends. I did a little start and stop right here. Same thing, I went back and forth, stitched back and forth, and this side. So I did the same thing on both. So you have a little bit stitched here, both your sides here, and the piece here. The next thing we're going to do is box the corners. I'm going to use the large for doing this on camera. I think it's going to be easier to see. If you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know this is not my favorite way to box corners. I have a video on how to make a fun little tote bag. I'll link it below. That's how I really like to box corners. It's easier. This is more precise though. I'm going to grab it, and I would say if this is your first time boxing corners, start with the lining side. It's going to be easier. Grab it like this, pull, and then you're going to want to pin. And what I like to do with the seams is just flip one way and one the other way. And a lot of times I don't pin these and they end up crooked, so today I will try pinning and seeing if I can get this straight. Match it up like that. Pin, add another pin, and then we'll get the other side. And you're going to do this for all 4 corners of both bags. Ideally, this is going to be straight. So take a little bit of time with your pinning. Try and get that matched up a little bit better. There we go. And pin there. And I am going to add one more pin. So this is what that's going to look like. And when you take it to the sewing machine, be careful not to catch that underneath. Let's do one of the bulky corners. This has the shape form. It may be a little bit more difficult to work with. It's going to require a little more muscle. I'm going to do the same thing. Flip the seam. When you go to sew this, try not to do this, which is what happens to me sometimes, and then I sew straight and I end up with it just being crooked. So try to hold it straight like that when you sew at the clips. And when you take it to your sewing machine, you just have to kind of squish it like that and then go ahead and sew. And I would go backwards and forward, sew, backwards and forward. So you have to do both lining corners, definitely pin those, and then both the corners that have the shape form. Go ahead and sew. I'll bring them back and show you what everything looks like. I've got everything sewn. We need to turn these right side out. There should be an opening right there at the bottom, and you're going to flip your basket right side out. It's going to take a little bit of patience to do this. Be careful, take your time. Don't worry about squishing the shape form. It'll pop back up, and you can also iron it if you need to. I've got this one turned. That was really easy. I'm working on the small. You can poke the corners out fairly easily. I don't feel like I need a tool to do that. And what I did was just kind of squish along the seam, and that'll help get the shape back for your basket. And then you could also squish right here and kind of make a seam, because the flexi foam will hold that shape. Now we have to do the lining. To do the lining, it shows hand stitching it closed. Not happening. I always do this on my sewing machine. It's the lining, it's the inside of a basket. All I do is sort of fold the inside in on both sides. You can iron it, you can pin it. Both will help. I'll probably do neither. I'll probably just go take this over to my machine and put that down and put a top stitch across that. Let's look at my stitching. I just folded the ends in and I ran a line of stitching. Here's the red one. Not perfectly straight, but again, this is the inside bottom of the basket and I'm putting stuff in it. I'm not worried about it. When I did the smaller one, I actually had to do it twice because I did not pin, I did not clip. I ran the line of stitching, flipped it over and looked, and the bottom piece had slipped out of the way and didn't get caught. All we need to do now is put the lining down on the inside. You can fuss with it, make it look however you want. Those folds have come back. If the folds bother you, and I probably will take this to my iron. I have a little Oliso mini iron. Probably get in there and make sure that this is nice and flat. I'm going to take a minute and press both of these down on the inside. Let's have a look at these. Very cute. Not quite perfect. You can see that this side has a little more ribbon, this side has a little less. Came out good. Not perfectly matched up, but that's all right. Let's look at the large basket. Here's the back of the large basket. The front has the detail. Matched up fairly well. Looks good. Beautiful. Love this. Oh, I need to take off that wash away topping. Looks good. Not quite matched up, but that's okay. And the lining seems to be a little bit bigger than the basket, but it looks really good. Let's take away the wash away topping. Got a little bit of water here. I'm just going to grab a Kleenex. There's not much, it's just in the center. So you can use a swab, a sponge brush, Kleenex. It's a small amount. I don't want to get the whole thing wet. Just set it like that. Cool water, it'll dissolve the topping. And then it came right up. It stuck to the Kleenex. And you can kind of wipe, make sure you got everything off. And then feel it. If you feel sticky, then there's some left. That feels pretty good. Let's put some stuff in our baskets. Let's start with the small one. How big is this? Here's some glide thread. You can fit more in there. You could probably fit 4 spools of thread in there. So smaller items like that. Maybe a clip container. Really handy. So when you're working on your projects, if you just need a few things, you can actually put them in the basket and take this over to your machine. Or you could keep it out on display. You could put a little plant in here. You could use this for gifts. You know what would go really well in here? A bag of candy or a bag of sewing notions. You can make as many of these as you want because now you have the digital pattern. You can make it in candy print fabrics and then fill it with candy. Really cute. Let's look at the larger one. Here's the bigger basket. I have this clip tin. The clip tin does fit. I can put it in the clip tin. Rotary cutter, I can probably put a couple in. This one's larger. It can fit more things. I am going to get a lot of use out of this. There's 2 more. This is the I cut sticky things with it rotary cutter, and this is the small rotary cutter. Look at that. They all fit in the basket. Very handy. I hope you've enjoyed making the Hoop Studio Sweet Scalloped Baskets with me. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below for me. I'll link the Hoop Studio playlist. I also work on Perfectly Pieced, Applique of the Month. I'm currently working on the Bella Box, Home Sewn, Sippin' on Sunshine, and several other projects. I'll be back next month with another Hoop Studio video. Thanks for making these with me. I'll see you next time.